Pen pal. Hello. My name is Wesley. I am 12 years old, and I am in 6th grade at Crescent Lake Elementary in Northern California. I'll be honest, I am only writing this letter because my teacher said we have to. She said if we don't, we'll get an F, and I am not about to fail an assignment and ruin my track record of perfect grades. Plus, my dad would probably ground me or something. Anyway, I don't really want a pen pal. I have friends here at school already, so why would I need to become friends with somebody who doesn't even live here, someone I'll never actually meet? So, yeah. That's really all I feel like I need to say to you. There's no point in telling you anything else about myself, since it's not like we'll continue to write to each other, or meet each other, or anything like that. I hope you don't take this the wrong way. It's nothing against you. Like I said, I don't even know you. You're probably a really nice person, and I'm sure that you, just like me, have plenty of friends at your school and don't need a friend who lives hundreds of miles away in a different state. Thanks for letting me write you this letter so I can get an A. Sincerely, Wesley Stone.
Wesley's POV.
Alright, class, make sure you address your envelopes the way I demonstrated on the board, and be sure to seal them properly before you leave them on my desk. I plan to put them in the mail to Colorado today after school, so hopefully, by next week, you will have an answer back from your pen pal. Now, please pack up your bags and line up at the door in a single file line so we can head out to dismissal for today. Don't forget to put your letters on my desk. I rolled my eyes at Mrs. Appleton's words, exchanging a look with my best friend, Reed Thomas. He was just as unenthusiastic about this assignment as I was, but I had to turn mine in. Otherwise, my dad, Alpha Harrison Stone, would make me run extra laps and do extra push-ups and sit-ups at training. He had high expectations and standards for my brother and me. Well, mostly me, since I would be the alpha of our pack someday. What did you write? Reed whispered while we both made our way down the aisles to drop our letters off on Mrs. Appleton's desk. I told whoever they are that I only wrote them because my dad would kill me if I got an F on an assignment as easy as writing a letter to a random person in another state. Reed snickered as he followed me through the rows of desks to the back of the room, where we kept our backpacks. My black bag and his gray bag hung next to each other on the hooks below our names. Even though we were 6th graders, Mrs. Appleton liked to keep her classroom set up the same as all the primary grade classrooms. Alphabetized everything: seats, backpacks, book boxes, even our line when we left for recess and lunch. It was a little childish, but I was not the teacher, so I tried not to complain. Often. I told mine to never write to me again, Reed explained, throwing his backpack over one shoulder and placing his baseball cap backwards on his head. Hats weren't allowed inside, but somehow, Reed always got away with wearing it. He would flash his signature cheeky grin at the teachers, and they would pretend they didn't even notice he was breaking the rules. If it was me, on the other hand, everyone would notice and make a big fuss. Because future Alpha Wesley Stone should always be the picture-perfect student. Future Alpha Wesley Stone should lead by example, even at only 12. No pressure, right? I'm just glad Mrs. Appleton isn't reading them before she sends them to her sister's class. Can you imagine the volcanic eruption that would take place in my dad's office if he got a call telling him what I wrote? I flinched and grimaced, and Reed laughed. We were finally in our line, waiting for the bell to ring so we could make our way through the halls and off the campus, where the sprawling packed grounds waited for us to spend the rest of our day training and goofing around. It was always my favorite time of day. Getting to be outside, running through the forest, and then throwing a football or bouncing a basketball around with my friends, nothing could beat that. The anticipation spreading between all my classmates was high. Not only was it the end of the day, but it was also Friday, which meant 2 whole days with no school. What kid, human or werewolf, didn't love the weekend? The bell finally rang, and we all tried our best to not run out the door. The kids at the front made a decent effort, but by the time Reed and I made it out, with our last names being near the end of the alphabet, we were always one of the last in line, and out the door, we were all running, pushing past each other to be the first one through the gate at the front of the school near the office. With werewolves, almost everything was a competition, especially between young males. Being the first student out of the gate had always been one of those things that everyone automatically fought for. It was an unspoken tradition. No one ever declared it was a race, it just was, and always had been. Even though I was still only 12, and there were students 1 and 2 years older than me at our school, I'd had the honor of being the winner since I was 8. I think, at first, the other kids were scared to beat me, afraid to be the one that made the future alpha come in second place. But at some point, I actually became the fastest. Part of it was genetics. Werewolves born with alpha blood became lichens and were genetically predisposed to be stronger, faster, and bigger than other werewolves. But it was also because I trained harder and longer than any other kid in our pack. I reached the gate first, of course, followed closely by Reed and our other best friend, Nolan Shepard, who was 1 year older than us. Not far behind him was my little brother, Sebastian. He was 2 years younger than Reed and me and 3 years younger than Nolan, but the four of us had been inseparable since we were pups. Our parents were the current leaders of our pack, and the four of us would take over for them in the future. Once we were ready, of course. And once I found my mate. Ugh, Nolan, be glad you're a year older than us. Mrs. Appleton made us do this stupid assignment. We have to write letters. To pen pals. It's just so dumb and childish. Reed complained as he punched Nolan lightly on the shoulder. Oh, poor you had to write a letter. Meanwhile, I have a 10-page report on the history of the moon goddess due on Monday. Nolan shot back, shoving Reed off the sidewalk and towards the copse of trees we always cut through to get to the pack house. And let me guess, you haven't even started it? I asked with a smirk. No, I wrote some already. How much? 1 page? Nolan paused for a moment, clearly deciding whether he wanted to answer me, before he finally, sheepishly said, a sentence. Sebastian, Reed, and I exchanged looks, all three of us trying to hold in our laughter. Reed broke first, his laugh cackling and echoing through the almost empty forest, scaring a flock of birds out of the branches of a nearby tree. Sebastian and I joined in right away, and even Nolan chuckled at himself a little. Our pack was in the redwood forests of Northern California, near a little-known lake shaped like a crescent moon. Hence, the name, Crescent Lake. Our pack was a decent size. Large enough to have our own elementary school on the grounds. It went up through 8th grade, so I'd be attending school there for 2 more years before they shipped me off to the nearby city's high school. Once I was there would be a mix of werewolves and humans. My teacher, Mrs. Appleton, had a sister who recently found her mate in a pack in Colorado, so she had moved there. The elementary school her sister worked at was a mixed school, meaning humans and wolves all together, even from kindergarten. She's the teacher whose class we were exchanging letters with, so I had to be careful not to reveal anything about werewolves in my letter, since I didn't know if my pen pal would be a wolf or a human. It was especially hard to not sign it Future Alpha Wesley Stone, since that was how I was used to writing my name and being addressed by most of the members of my pack. Not that it mattered, because there was no way I was going to be writing to my pen pal again. I did the bare minimum for the assignment. I would get my A, and then I would never have to write to them again.
Haven's POV.
My jaw clenched after reading his letter, and I turned it over, grabbed the closest writing utensil to me, a dull, red crayon, and wrote out my response. Dear Wesley Stone, you do not deserve the word dear in front of your name. You are a big, ugly meanie. I hope someone punches you in your stupid face, and I hope it hurts you the same way your words hurt me. See you never. Haven Kenway. I dropped the red crayon onto the top of my desk, then tucked my hands beneath my thighs, trapping them between my legs and the seat of my chair so no one could see how much they shook. I blinked back, the tears shimmering in my eyes, trying to remind myself it was nothing personal. It was nothing against me. He didn't even know me or anything about me. He wasn't trying to be a big, ugly meanie. I shouldn't have let his words bother me. He didn't know I was an orphan. He didn't know someone left me at the fire station when I was a baby, wrapped in a purple blanket with my name, Haven Kenway, embroidered on one corner. He didn't know the social workers searched for any records of anyone with the last name Kenway having given birth in any nearby town and that they found nothing. He didn't know I had spent my life being moved from home to home to home. He didn't know I was with my 9th family in the same number of years. Again, it shouldn't have bothered me. Because I was finally in a home where I felt comfortable and safe, where I actually felt the beginning of a connection to the people fostering me. When I was a baby, they moved me early. I was what they called high needs. I constantly needed to be held and hated to be left alone in any room, ever. I guess it was exhausting for my first family because they moved me before I was even a year old. The next family lasted longer, almost until I was 2, before they decided I was too old, and they only wanted to foster babies. And after I turned 2, it had been one home every year. Until it wasn't. My foster parents, Jack and Shirley Franklin, didn't have any other kids in their home. Well, not anymore, at least. Their children were all grown up and moved out, so they wanted to open their home to a child in need. A child like me. I'd been keeping my fingers crossed that this placement would last longer than the rest. It had already been almost a year since I moved here when I was 8. Jack and Shirley had treated me with nothing but kindness. They bought me what I needed when I needed it, and even got me surprise gifts when there wasn't any reason for them. They showed up for every school event, and Shirley picked me up from school in her air-conditioned car every day. They enrolled me in dance lessons, something I had been wanting to try since I was 4 years old, and caught a snippet of someone dancing ballet on TV. They told me I could call them Mom and Dad, too, but I just couldn't bring myself to do that yet. When my hands were back to normal and not trembling, I removed them from beneath my legs and scanned his letter one more time, checking the address on the envelope so I could write the correct address on mine. He said he didn't want to continue to write to each other, but, just like him, my teacher was giving us a grade for this pen pal assignment. So I had to write him back. But I couldn't send him what I wrote on the back of his letter. It was the truth, but I didn't want to be a big, ugly meanie back to him. Shirley always said, treat others the way you want to be treated, and Jack always said, you can't fight fire with fire. And I didn't want to get in trouble. I took a deep breath, calming my emotions and forcing the tears down. I was Haven Kenway, and I would not let some stupid 12-year-old boy get to me. I grabbed my favorite pencil, one of the good ones, the kind with the type of eraser that didn't leave annoying streaks on the paper, and I sharpened it with my handheld sharpener until it was as pointy as possible. My pencils always had to be sharp. I couldn't stand dull pencils. I pulled up my dictionary and thesaurus, setting them within easy reach. Then I took out a clean piece of my nice, crisp, white paper with perfect blue lines and wrote back to my pen pal, who didn't want me. Dear Wesley, thank you for being honest with me. It's not a surprise that you don't want me as a friend. I'm used to people not wanting me. You see, I'm an orphan. My parents left me when I was a baby. I was only a few days old. I have lived in pretty much one home a year since I was a baby. So I guess that would make it 9 homes now, since I am 9 years old. And since I move so much, it makes it harder to make friends. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I just wanted to tell you I know why you did it, and even though you didn't ask for it, I forgive you. I hope you get your A. Haven Kenway.
Sometime later. Wesley's POV.
The reply letter came in our packhouse mail almost a week after I sent mine. I didn't realize that I wrote my home address as the return address on the envelope instead of the school's address. I arrived home to find the letter was already opened. It was on the small, round dining table in the kitchen of the Alpha suite. We called it a suite, but it was really more like a penthouse apartment where my family and I lived. My mom sat in the chair facing the doorway, giving me the look. Every kid knew that look. It was the look that put the fear of Celine in the toughest of wolves and lichens. The look that made even my dad, Alpha Harrison Stone of the Crescent Lake Pack, tuck his tail between his legs and say, "I'm sorry," before he even knew what he did wrong. The look that said, "You done messed up." That look. Don't get me wrong. My mom, Luna Emily Stone, was the best mom any Leaking could ever ask for. I mean that. She was truly the glue that held our family, and our pack, together, just like any good Luna should. That's why the ancestors of our pack made a rule that the Alpha heir could only take over the pack once they found their mate, be it fated or chosen, so they had the person who could balance them and keep them from being too overworked or stressed. Obviously, The pack had the beta, gamma, and delta positions to help the alpha with that as well, but those people couldn't calm down an angry, irritated Leakin in the same way their mate could. Even if something happened to the current alpha before the heir found their mate, the next highest ranked member with a mate would run the pack until the heir found or chose their mate. Not all werewolf packs handled succession that way. Some packs designated an age at which they handed the pack over, and others let the current alpha decide when their heir was ready. But this was the way our pack had done things since the beginning. With that look on my mom's face, I was likely in for an earful. I didn't get in trouble often. I was usually well-behaved and a rule follower, but just like any preteen kid, wolf or Leakin or human, I messed up occasionally. I sat down in the chair right across from her, folding my hands on top of the table as I eyed her curiously. She gestured at the opened letter on the table, so I picked it up, took out the letter, and read it to myself. With each word, I shrank further and further into my seat at the table, my mother's eyes boring a hole straight into my brain, as if she might extract the words that I had written to this girl that made her respond so coldly to me. We didn't get names when we got the assignment. Mrs. Appleton said her sister would just distribute the letters randomly to the students in her class. How was I supposed to know that my letter would be given to the one student in class who needed a friend more than anybody else? That didn't change the fact that I now realized I shouldn't have written what I did. It wouldn't have mattered who she had given the letter to. Even if the student was someone who had tons of friends, my words would have been rude no matter what. I lifted my eyes to meet the steely gaze of my mother's gray eyes, and she could already see the remorse in mine, could already see that I understood I had made a huge mistake. She softened a bit and leaned across the table and placed her hand over mine as she said in a soft voice, "You know what you need to do." I nodded. She was right. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to do what any true alpha, any alpha worth his title, would do, own up to my mistake. So many alphas thought they never needed to apologize when they were wrong, or even worse, that they couldn't possibly ever do anything wrong. One of the most important things my father had emphasized to me during my alpha training was to own up to my mistakes. We were just as imperfect as any other person, human or wolf. Being an alpha didn't change that. We were just as prone to mistakes, or fuck-ups, as Dad liked to say when my mother wasn't around, as the rest of the world. What made us different was showing that we realized we'd messed up, and how we reacted to that mistake, and whether we changed ourselves or if we kept making the same mistake over and over and over. If we truly learned from our actions, we could grow and move forward. If we kept repeating our errors, well, then that just showed that we were stuck in our ways. These actions affected our pack as well. If the alpha was stubborn and set in his ways, then the pack would be stuck in the past. They'd plateau and never rise above the others or continue to be successful. But if an alpha was open-minded and able to learn and grow, then the pack would thrive and succeed in all of their endeavors. My mother stood up from her chair at our small table and walked through the doorway of the dining room. Her heels clicked on the wood floor for several steps, and then she paused, picked something up, and headed back towards me. I twisted in my chair so I could see her when she came back into the room. She was carrying my backpack that I had left unceremoniously next to the front door of our apartment. She set it down on the floor next to my chair, her unwavering gaze boring through my skull as I tried to avoid eye contact with her. "I am leaving to pick your sister up from pup care," she told me. "I expect your letter to be finished by the time I get back with Madeline." With that, she turned on her heel and walked out of our apartment, leaving me alone with the letter from Haven and my own thoughts. I sat there for a few minutes, the only sound the ticking of our old grandfather clock in the living room. I thought about what I wanted to write to this girl. Haven. I slowly got out my pencil and a piece of paper from my backpack and set them on the table in front of me as I got into my writing mode. At first, it was difficult for me to find the words to say to her, but the more I wrote, the easier it became, until the pencil in my hand could not keep up with the words flowing through my mind. By the time Mom returned with Maddie, I had written the longest letter I had ever written in my life. I had an envelope from my father's small office in our apartment already addressed and sitting next to the letter on the dining room table. I stood straight and tall next to it, waiting for my mother to inspect my writing. She surprised me, however, by only checking to see if I finished it. Then she nodded without a word and walked away. She was putting her faith in me to treat this girl respectfully in my letter, and I was proud that she trusted me enough to not check over every word on the page. I quickly folded the letter and carefully stuffed it in the envelope, sealing it and setting it in the stack of outgoing mail near our front door, just as Maddie came barreling into me. Her arms wrapped around my legs, nearly causing me to fall over on top of her. Her tiny giggles echoed through the entry, mingling with my laugh that was becoming deeper as I neared the age of receiving my leakin. I lifted her little 3-year-old body with ease, throwing her over my shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Her giggles turned into full-bellied laughs as I ran through our home with her dangling behind me. "Wessie," she shrieked, just as I threw her down on her back onto her princess pink bed, topped with the squishiest feathered duvet and the most ridiculous frilly and lacy pillows I had ever laid eyes on. She wriggled around, trying to flee. But of course I was faster than her, and my hands tickled her belly before she even had the chance to attempt an escape. Her tiny legs kicked towards me as I continued tickling her, but I stopped before she became too hysterical or out of breath or, even worse, wet herself. I turned to leave her room, hoping to wrangle Sebastian or Reed into playing a video game with me, but her little voice asked from behind me, "Wessie, please read me a story." I sighed and looked at her, prepared to say no, but of course she was giving me the wolf pup eyes, complete with the pouty bottom lip and batting eyelashes, her little hands clasped under her chin as she silently begged me. I couldn't say no to that face. No one could. Maddie had perfected that look, further cementing her status as the princess of our pack. Without a word, I moved back to her bed, grabbing our copy of the Goddess's Tales from her bookshelf. The book of myths and legends and fairy tales was passed down through the generations in our family, but had somehow remained in decent condition, even with its age. It was well loved, but the binding was still intact, and none of the pages had tears or bends. The tales in the book made up all the stories that had been told over the centuries about Selene. No one knew anymore which of them, or which parts of them, were true. But every werewolf and leekin heard them growing up, just as human children heard their own fairy tales, such as Cinderella or Hansel and Gretel. They did not know most of their stories were based on a sliver of truth, that the magical beings they read about were actually all around them, hidden in plain sight. "Which one shall we read today, Maddie?" I asked her, holding the book up for her to see. She clapped her hands excitedly, settling herself next to me and saying, "Rhea. I want Rhea." I groaned. She always wanted a mysterious story. I liked it because of the part about the creation of the Leakin werewolves, but I had heard it way too many times. "No, we just read that one the other day," I argued. I thumbed through the pages, looking at the titles as I flipped through them. "How about the Alpha Pup's Best Friend?" I suggested, showing her the page. "No!" she shouted. I sighed. That was one of my favorites, because it told of the first beta, and I always thought of mine and Reed's friendship. I flipped through the book some more until I ended up back at the very beginning. The first story, the story of our origins. "The first of the wolves?" I asked, peeking at her from the corner of my eye. Her eyes lit up, but then she forced a frown. However, it was too late. I had already seen her excitement. "First wolves it is!" I exclaimed in triumph, and she giggled and settled in next to me as I began to read.
Wesley's POV.
"Once upon a time, two peeps fell in love and dash. That's not how it goes." "Wessie!" Maddie laughed, pushing me with her little hands. I pretended to fall down on the mattress from her shove. "Wessie," she whined, pulling on my arm. Okay. I chuckled. "I'll start over." I took a breath and began again. "A long time ago, when the world was brand new, the gods and goddesses walked among us. They lived within the world they had created, celebrating in its beauty and its bounty with the people of the land. The gods and humans and other beings lived together in harmony, celebrating the magnificence they lived in." "What's magnificence?" Maddie interrupted. "Magnificence," I corrected. "Yeah, that. It means wonderful or great," I told her. "Can I keep reading?" She nodded, and I continued. "But the peace among the inhabitants was a tentative peace, a fragile peace. As such, each of the gods and goddesses created warriors, their own followers blessed with a touch of their magic to be stronger than the average human. Selene, the goddess of the moon, gave each of her warriors a special connection to a wolf. This wolf was their companion, their friend, their extra eyes and ears and strength. They could communicate mentally with their wolf, and they had a life bond with them. One could not live without the other. The bond formed when both were young, and the wolves would live until the human died either by natural causes, old age, or in battle. The warriors loved their canine companions and treated them even better than a pet. They trained with them, ate with them, hunted with them, and lived with them. As you might have guessed, however, not all was as it seemed, and not all the beings of the world were content with how the gods and goddesses had chosen their favorites. There was another clan, Clan Vijay, a clan who thrived on bloodshed and violence, who also worshipped Selene above any other. But she had not chosen them as her blessed warriors, and they held a grudge against the clan she had chosen, Clan Alphanovel. "I don't like them," Maddie grumbled. "You're not supposed to," I pointed out. "Now let me read." She muttered something under her breath, but let me read. This jealousy and this grudge festered and grew over the years until it became a deep-seated hatred. It ran so deep, became so ingrained into their lives, that none of the clan members remembered the origins of their envy. They only knew that the clan was their enemy, and that they deserved more than they had received. That year, at the annual gathering of the clans, the leader of Clan Vijay brought his daughter, Ides, with him for the first time. She had just become of age, and he was hoping to make a match for her with the leader of another clan. "I'm going to be Ides for Halloween this year," she told me. "Cool," I sighed, then I paused, glancing at her to see if she would interrupt again. She smiled at me, waiting, and I kept going. People always drank and partied on the first night of the gathering. It was a noisy event, an event where the clans put aside their differences, for the most part, and just celebrated life. Carl, of Clan Alphanovel, was there with two of his friends, Norman and Wilhelm. All three of them were looking to make matches with females while at the gathering. They were ready to settle down from their wild ways and raise families of their own. It was typical for members of the warrior clans to find a life partner at the gathering, but it was not typical for members of Clan Alphanovel to choose a partner from a different clan. Doing so would cause issues, as their partner would not have a wolf companion, and would be unable to take part in many of their customs, since only Clan Alphanovel members had such companions. Ides immediately captivated Carl when he first laid eyes on her. He knew then and there that she was the only female for him, and he declared he would have no other. He approached her and told her of his intentions, not knowing what clan she hailed from or even caring what clan she belonged to. He cared only for her soft smile and her sparkling eyes and her long, dark hair that he longed to run his fingers through. As the night wore on, the two drifted away from the revel so they could learn more about each other. Ides was just as taken with Carl as he was with her, and by the time the sun began to rise, they had agreed to speak to their parents to arrange a match. When Carl walked her back to where her clan was staying for the gathering, it shocked him to see she was not only a member of his clan's greatest enemy, but the daughter of their leader. He was undeterred, however. In fact, his resolve to have Ides only deepened. He had hopes that their union might bring an end to the long-endured feuding of their people. Farting? Feuding. Sounds like farting to me, she giggled. I ground my teeth together but kept going. He left Ides at the edge of her campsite and returned to his own clan, vowing to himself that he would convince Clan Alphanovel to accept a member of Clan Vijay by the end of the gathering. Throughout the long days of the gathering, Ides and Carl met as much as possible, almost always in secret. Carl showed her the ways of the wolf warriors, and it delighted her to spend time not only with him, but with his wolf companion as well. As the days continued, Carl noticed a small female wolf beginning to approach the area where they would meet. She would draw closer to them with each passing day, until at last, she drew the courage to walk right up to Ides. When Ides reached out to pet the wolf, a spark passed between the two, forging a connection between them, just as all members of Clan Alphanovel had with their own wolves. I can't wait until I get my wolfie, Maddie said, her legs bouncing on the bed. She is going to be so pretty. You'll get a leakin' though, I pointed out. She frowned, then asked, but she'll still be pretty, right? I'm sure she'll be beautiful, I said with a smile. She smiled back, then pointed at the book. Read! Ides was first shocked, then ecstatic when she realized she had been given her own wolf companion. She danced with joy, her wolf leaping and prancing along beside her in celebration. Carl and his wolf joined as well, until the four of them were too tired to continue. They sat with their wolf friends on the floor of the forest, and after their adrenaline had worn off, they fell asleep. Unbeknownst to them, their families were in a panic, searching high and low for their missing members. No one had seen them since the previous morning, and everyone was beginning to worry. Accusations flew. Each clan was convinced the other had done something to hurt Ides and Carl. As tempers rose, and each clan started to reach for their weapons, Wilhelm and Norman interfered, stepping between the two clans, their chosen partners' hands grasped in their own. For they too had chosen members of Clan Vijay as their life partners. And like Ides, their partners had also been given their own wolf companions. As Norman and Wilhelm spoke to the clans with Frida and Dagmar at their sides, explaining what had happened, many of the people around them lowered their weapons. They realized if the children could set aside their differences to join together, that maybe they should as well. As this was happening, Carl and Ides returned, unaware of the issue that had arisen in their absence. And while many members of the clans began to see they were wrong to hold their grudge for so long, Ides' father was unhappy to see his daughter with a member of the Adolwolf clan. In his rage, he lashed out, raising his weapon against Carl's wolf, for he knew if he killed his wolf that Carl would die as well. Ides saw her father's intentions, and rushed in front of the wolf to defend him. She closed her eyes, prepared to feel the fatal blow delivered by her own father. But the blow never came. Instead, the sword fell to the ground with a loud thud. Her father dropped to his knees in front of his daughter. She opened her eyes to find him in the dirt, tears forming in his eyes as he looked at her with regret. He realized then how dangerous the jealousy and hatred they held towards Clan Adolwolf truly was. He had almost killed his own daughter because of his misguided anger. He begged Ides and Carl for their forgiveness. They, seeing his true regret, of course granted it. The two clans mingled, and her father gave his blessing to their match, as well as to the matches between Norman and Dagmar and Wilhelm and Frida. Upon seeing the clans put aside their differences to join together as one, Celine decided to grant Clan Vijay with wolf companions as well. The clans celebrated this momentous offering together, merging their two clans with the union of Ides and Carl, as well as their friends. Celine attended the celebration, and to honor and thank the 6 young clan members, she merged their human and wolf spirits into one, allowing them to shift at will, and thus creating in them the first werewolves, from whom we are all descended. The door to Maddie's room slammed against the wall hard as Sebastian ran in and yelled, "Hide me!" I rolled my eyes and gestured at the book in my lap. "Can't you see we're reading?" "Can't you see my life is in peril?" he retorted, then jumped over the bed to the gap between the frame and the wall. He began pulling Maddie's pillows and stuffed animals on top of him to block him from view. "What did you do?" I asked him as Maddie and I just sat there watching him. "I drew a penis on Reed's forehead while he was sleeping on our couch," he explained, way too calm. Why?" I sighed. "Why would you do that?" "Well, he called me a dickhead earlier." "What's a dickhead?" Maddie asked. "I'll tell you when you're older," Seb replied. Anyway, I drew one on his face and then when he woke up I said, "Who is the dickhead now?" And now I'm running for my life. "Reed, Bastian is in here." Maddie yelled at the top of her lungs before giving Sebastian a smug grin. "Oh, no, you did not just do that," Sebastian yelled. "Traitor!" He jumped up out of his hiding spot just as Reed appeared in the doorway, his face bright red with a giant dick drawn with permanent marker onto his forehead. I stifled my laughter with the book as Sebastian stood there frozen. "Well, it is nice to know someone is on my side," Reed said with a wink at Maddie. Seb glanced at me, and Reed dove forward. "Ah!" Sebastian screamed as he darted around Reed and out the door. Footsteps echoed through the hall and down the steps as Reed followed after him, Maddie close behind chanting, "Get Seb! Get Seb! Get Seb!" I sighed again and tossed the book on her bed. "I give up," I muttered, then ran after my friend to hopefully save my brother from a slow and gruesome death at the hands of my future beta.